Welcome back to another episode of Chatting Cinema. This will be the first of probably many little tier makers that we're going to do. We'll see how challenging this is for us. We're starting with the Marvel Cinematic Universe today.
If you've ever watched or listened to this podcast, you know that we hate the MCU.
Yes.
We think it's gray. We think the posters suck. We think it's terrible. Just kidding. We all adore it with probably
Hashtag
too much love.
Snyderverse.
Yeah.
Too much love is probably accurate.
Yeah. So, do we start with, is it Iron Man? Did that kick off?
Yeah.
Well, technically, I think Hulk is on here. Yeah, Hulk's there. So I guess Hulk is first.
The Incredible Hulk.
I barely remember this movie.
I would set the tone and put Hulk in F tier if I'm being perfectly honest.
Yeah.
Just because if we want to fill out, we're not putting anything in a worse fate than F, because I don't think any of these movies are actually bad movies.
Yeah.
But if we want to make sure that like everything has something in it other than that one, Incredible Hulk to me is always my like weakest MCU movie, on like the basis that the strength of the MCU is kind of the connective tissue, and it's the one that feels the most disconnected for me.
Yeah.
Not, it's part of the MCU, but I think it's because of the fact that the protagonist is recast, because like we have other MCU recasts like Terrence Howard and stuff as Rhodey, but the fact that the movie's lead is somebody that is not part of the wider MCU anymore, I think always, even though William Hurt, rest in peace, his General Ross is there, even though Tony pops up at the end, it just feels, like the most disconnected. And even though they kind of go back to it in What If recently, that to me is always like the bottom, because all the other ones benefit from having those connections to the wider MCU, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I barely remember this, so I'm okay with Flynn's assessment of it.
I think even from like, I know there's people who want to say that all the MCU movies are the same, but the Hulk really does feel like outside of the universe.
Yeah.
When you go back to it. But anyway, moving on.
And again,
quickly.
Not a bad movie. Not a bad movie at all.
Not at all.
Iron Man, I think, easily belongs in B or A, like depending on what else ends up there. I'm okay with putting it in A to start, though.
I go A because I think this truly kicked off the MCU. And for the longest time, Iron Man was my favorite superhero because of this movie. But looking back on it, I don't know if it all holds up as well as we want to believe.
Ooh, hot take brewing.
I gotta say, I have the hottest takes on the Iron Man trilogy, because as much as I love Tony and I think that his arc is so well defined, and obviously Robert Downey Jr. gives probably the best wide performance throughout the MCU. I think the only person up there currently with him is Chris Evans, and that's debatable. I do think that like Iron Man, when you talk about the quote unquote MCU formula, it like set that up, like kind of arrogant hero that has to come into his own by the end, fights an evil version of himself. Like that is the typical MCU origin. And I don't know, I think that it was a great start for the MCU, but as time has gone on, they found like little ways to tinker with it and improve it a little bit. But I do think it's the best Iron Man movie. I personally would have it probably a little bit lower than it should be. So,
I mean, like I said, I'm okay with A or B for now. We can always go back and readjust as we get further in. But
there's some.
I'm kind of with you, Gianni, where like because of how strong it started, and like to this day, like a lot of the things that make Marvel movies, this movie did first.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, it may not hold up in every way because I did watch it recently, but at the same time, like I just feel like there was something so special about this movie, regardless of whether you liked it or not, where like you felt something brewing by the end of it, where like this wasn't just another one-off movie. Like this actually could turn into something, and it did. So that's nice.
One last thing I want to say about Iron Man, and maybe I should save this for when we get to Iron Man 3, but this might be a hot take. I think Tony Stark and Iron Man's best arcs don't come until like the first Avengers film.
I agree.
Through the next Avengers movies, but especially like Civil War.
Civil War,
No.
yeah.
Civil
I
War is
completely agree
definitely.
with
War
that.
is the
Yeah, I was
one.
gonna say that too.
Yeah. But anyway, what the hell is it? Thor or Iron Man 2?
Iron Man 2 is next.
I think Thor. I think Thor
I
came
thought it
out
was
in,
Thor, right?
yeah, I think Thor came out in 2009. And
Hmm.
Iron
They
Man 2
teased it
came out
at
in
the end
2010.
of, I don't know, did they? When did they tease the
No,
hammer?
Iron Man's
No,
first.
Iron Man 2's post-credit scene is Coulson going to the pit
That's
with
what
the
I
hammer.
thought. Yeah.
No, I think that's the Incredible Hulk's post-credit scene. I'm
Interesting.
almost positive Iron Man 2 is 2010. Hold on. I have the letterbox. Oh, my bad. Iron Man 2 was 2010. Thor was 2011.
Wow.
Wow,
Yeah.
that didn't feel. That's weird. All right, well, it is Iron Man 2 then.
Yes,
I'm
it
gonna
is
go
Iron Man 2. My bad.
See?
Yeah, I mean, like at,
See?
at the time it came out, I think I liked it a lot more. But
Yeah, I had
now
an
as
Iron
we've
Man 2
got,
birthday party. I loved it.
but I feel like now that we have everything else we're about to rank, it definitely suffered.
I think this is going to get bumped down as we keep going. I'm fine with putting it in C now, but I think that it's going to get bumped down
Fair.
because of the breadth of the MCU.
Yeah.
I will say off the bat, I have been a defender of the first Thor movie, and I actually didn't watch it until I was catching up for Infinity War because I actually hadn't seen all of the MCU films, particularly the first two Thor movies.
Right.
I made it a point to see everything before Infinity War. And I remember really being surprised by Thor because I was going into it thinking like everyone hates these movies. I'm gonna have a bad time.
Kenneth
I liked
Branagh
it.
hive.
I enjoyed it.
I will say this of Thor. I think that it's really good until we leave Asgard. And then I think that like when you get to like New Mexico and he's not Thor and he's got to get the hammer back. And, you know, I like Jane Foster as a character, and I'm sure that everybody's going to be like, oh, Jane Foster was always my favorite after Thor Love and Thunder comes out, but whatever. I like her as a character. I like Darcy, and I like Stellan Skarsgård in that movie, but I don't know. There's something about like how vibrant Kenneth Branagh makes Asgard that it feels like it's a real bummer when you leave it. Like I wouldn't have minded like that whole movie just being on Asgard and Thor figuring out how to be worthy like on Asgard. But whatever. It's still I think it's right to put it in D tier. Depending on what happens, I think that it could make no, I think it'll probably stay in D tier. Like I said, the Asgard stuff is really cool. And Tom Hiddleston as Loki is as always excellent in that movie.
I think my favorite part about Thor is that it really fleshed out the universe more than we thought it was going to, where like going back to it, it establishes so much that then becomes important. And Hawkeye's introduction in that movie is still one of my favorite character introductions. Jeremy Renner kills that role, especially now as we get to one of the more recent projects with Hawkeye. But personally, I think I would put it above Iron Man 2, but I know this is our collective brain trust. So I'm okay with leaving it in D tier because again, D tier is not bad. I think the only way you would consider bad is a worse fate than F that this person put on their tier maker.
Yeah, this is one of those things where you're doing tier makers where it's like it's low like comparatively. Like it's got to stay low in comparison to everything else. So yeah, I think that it's fine. It's just fine for me. So I'm cool with having it in D tier.
Before we do this next one, I'll preface it by saying that this is my personal bias. I think the Captain America trilogy is all A tier, with the exception of Civil War. I think it's S tier.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But
I would probably put First Avenger in B tier, but I think it's a great movie.
A tier for First Avenger.
All right, I think we go with A tier because I do think it's phenomenal. I think it's a great movie.
I think our first S tier is right here.
Absolutely.
First
Couldn't agree more. And you know what? I said this before we were recording, and I feel like there's one S tier per phase.
At least.
Out of phase one, that's the best movie.
Oh, by far.
Yeah. I mean, that movie was a cultural event, not just the story and like the movie itself, but like theaters were selling out in 2012 to see this movie. And that's nuts.
I think because of how far we've come in the MCU and like when you look at what has happened and what happens in Infinity War and Endgame and what's happened since, people forget how good this movie is. And I think personally, it's a tiny bit slow to start. That might feel weird to say because, like, it starts with Loki. He's in the compound, blah, blah, blah. They're assembling the team, and that's all good. But I think once it really starts going, man, like everything on the helicarrier is brilliant.
I was going to say, I think once we get to the helicarrier on, it flies.
Yeah.
Like that first fight scene where they're in the mountains and stuff, I didn't
right.
love.
Oh, that I was going to say that might honestly be in Germany, I think, is where it really takes off for me. Because I quote Loki from the Germany scene all the time. I'm constantly saying there are no men like me all the time. It's just a quote. It's not like an ego thing. I'm not like saying it to people, but it goes through my mind all the time because I think that was like, I think he's the perfect first villain for the Avengers. And I think that watching them all collectively come together and fight for something bigger than themselves, I think it's so inspiring. And like, it's really nice, even though it's so big compared to everything that comes after it, it feels like quaint looking at the Avengers just save New York. But I mean, that third act is what I think is always going to remain from the MCU. Years and years and years from now, maybe we're not talking about how big Infinity War and Endgame are. I don't know. I don't know what the future looks like. But I think that the scene of them teaming up for the first time, that circular shot, I think that that's going to endure forever. So S tier.
If you asked me today, like what my favorite Avengers movie is, I think my quick answer off the top of my head is Endgame, of course. But I really have to take a step back and think, like, is it this 2012 first Avengers movie? I don't know. I really go back and forth sometimes. And I'd have to check my Letterboxd stats to be sure, but I'm pretty sure that I've rewatched the Avengers more than any other MCU movie.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's fair. It's so good.
That's pretty soon going to be taken over by No Way Home. But
yeah.
Anyway.
Now we're on to Iron Man 3.
Iron Man 3.
So I kind of okay with putting it in like C or D.
Yeah.
I think I like Thor more than Iron Man 3.
Yeah.
I'm cool with D. And I think it's a shame because like there's so much good in here. Like genuinely, I think that the way Shane Black handles Tony's PTSD is really fascinating. And like the scene where he doesn't have his armor and it's kind of like coming to him slowly in the compound, I think is really interesting because it's cool to let Tony Stark just use his intellect and like try and make his way through the situation like stealthy Stark. I don't know. It's just something about the whole package, and maybe like the discourse about it bogs it down for me because I know there's some people that really, really love this movie. But when I was doing my last MCU rewatch, like all of the MCU, it was probably like last year, I think. I remember getting to this and just being like, yeah, it's pretty good. It's not one of those things that like personally I feel really connected to. So
when I look at the trailers for this movie, if you go back and watch them now, they were so good. Like, and I thought they were setting up a very different movie. And I think that's a lot of the reason why I think people don't like this movie.
Yeah. I think people remember the Mandarin twist too. And are like, even though like, I mean, the way Shang-Chi handles it, we'll get to later, which is really good. But like at this stage of the MCU, they couldn't really do the Mandarin. And people were like clamoring for it, and I don't think they understood why they couldn't do the Mandarin the right way. So, especially because the 10 Rings is teased in the first Iron Man, so it's like, oh, it's inevitable, whatever. But yeah, I think it's that Mandarin twist. But I will also say people forget just how big this movie was too. I mean, it was coming off the back of the Avengers, and this made over $1 billion. Right? Over $1 billion. So this movie was gigantic when it came out. So
it came out not against, but in the same year as Dark Knight Rises, right?
Yeah.
I think it came out. I think Dark Knight Rises was 2012. No.
Oh.
I think it came out right after Dark Knight Rises, and that was like the comparative. I think Man of Steel came out in 2013.
Oh, that's right.
That's what it was. Yeah. Back when people thought Henry Cavill and Christian Bale were gonna meet.
I put Thor and Thor: The Dark World on like the same level.
That's fine with me.
Like,
yeah.
Also, I don't know if you guys want to rank the individual tiers.
I'm cool with just letting them.
Yeah. All right.
I was gonna say I'm cool with just letting them, like, everybody knowing that the tier means of like equal value.
Yeah, we'll rank S tier.
Yeah, we'll rank S tier. I like that.
But Thor: The Dark World, I feel like gets a lot of unnecessary hate for being a just fine movie.
It's a fun heist.
Yeah.
I think it's very hated when, again, just like the first Thor movie, I feel like it does a lot of important things, especially in Endgame. It ends up being important.
Yeah.
And as somebody who, like Gianni, I mean, I hadn't watched Thor: The Dark World until it was like leading up to everything. I was like, I finally got to watch this one. And it's like, I remember everyone being like, it's the worst one. I'm like, it was still a good movie. So I think we're fine here. Like, I think we're doing something good.
I think they really stepped up the action in Thor: The Dark World. I liked the interactions with Loki and Thor.
Yeah.
It was good. It was fun.
I mean, Tom Hiddleston's a treat whenever he's on screen. He can be in the worst movie ever as Loki and it'll be fine.
This was still in the era where Marvel had a villain problem, and Malekith blows. He's so uninteresting. Like, the Dark Elves are so, like, they're just like handled like nothing. So I think that also bogs down the movie. But yeah, overall, I think it's good. And again, we get more of that Asgard stuff. We get the Warriors 3. We get Sif in expanded roles. So pretty cool. Oh boy.
Yeah, so like I think I would fight for S tier for this one. But like it's solidly an A tier as well. Like
I lean A tier, even though, like, I know a lot of people put it in S tier. I love Winter Soldier.
Me too.
It's so good. And it's so funny because you're talking about like villain problem, and like I guess Alexander Pierce is like, you know, a typical villain. But like when you think of villain in this movie, you think of like the anti-villain, which is Bucky. And Steve and Bucky in this movie, it's handled so perfectly. It's so interesting to me, and it's so compelling. Like the scene on the bridge where he first figures out that it's Buck, and the hand-to-hand combat in that scene, the opening fight with like Batroc the Leaper, and the introduction of Sam Wilson, and the way, I don't know if Natasha's been handled better than she is here in this movie, to be perfectly honest. Like, I think that this is the best showcase of Black Widow too. So just a great spy thriller. Like, man, this movie is so good.
And
I know that he kind of took a back seat after Civil War, but I think Henry Jackman's score in this is really memorable too. Like, it really holds up for me. Every time I see this movie, I can't wait to hear the Winter Soldier's theme. It's good. And the Russo brothers, this was their first MCU movie.
Oh, that's
and they
right.
went on to obviously, take the helm,
This was the why are they getting the Community guys to do this era before this movie came out.
I remember being like 15-year-old kid, and I would be like shadow boxing. Thinking about that knife scene in the
I tried to do the knife thing with my pencil like all the time. I would be like trying to flip it in my hand. I also remember spoiling the Bucky reveal for somebody in high school, just like in a computer class, because I was like, oh, I didn't know, I thought it was like common knowledge. I didn't. Like, my bad. I forgot that people just don't like know that stuff.
And the Nick Fury car chase. So good. So
I was going to say, that's probably one of my favorite scenes of the movie, leading into him and Cap's conversation. So good.
Chevy Tuckahos have never looked so good. Like, oh man.
Waiting for the glass to be like at 1% before he pulls out the gun from his center console. Fantastic. Another fantastic one is coming up.
Guardians.
I almost went Age of Ultron. That's embarrassing.
Yeah, next year. Guardians. Marvel was out of their mind dropping Guardians.
My hand slipped. It's not a D tier.
Oh my god.
if we're sticking to one, or at least like one from each phase for S tier, I feel like Guardians is the S tier of phase 2.
Yeah.
Like,
is it?
I think so.
Phase 2 ends with Ant-Man, right?
Yeah, because Civil War starts phase 3. Otherwise, it'd be Civil War all day, every day.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm fine with that if we're picking an S tier. Honestly, if I was picking an S tier from this, it would probably be Winter Soldier, and then Guardians would be an A tier. But I'm fine with this too. It's a great movie.
I just think Guardians was one of the things that solidified the MCU was here to stay.
Because this was a gamble, right?
This was a huge gamble because, like Flynn had just said, we didn't know Bucky not being the Winter Soldier was common knowledge. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I considered myself a big comic fan at that point, and I hadn't ever read a Guardians comic. I'd heard of them barely and knew some pictures and characters from like my Marvel encyclopedia. But like, aside from that, I didn't know the Guardians, and that was like my first true experience with them. And for it to be such like a fun sci-fi adventure with such endearing characters and like really great individual story arcs for each of them, it felt like an Avengers movie where instead of having to meet them all alone, we got them as the team, and they already were the Avengers but of space.
Yeah, nobody, if somebody tells you they gave a shit about the Guardians of the Galaxy before 2014, there's like a 99% chance that they're lying, because even like Guardians comics now, it's all just the Guardians from the movie or like the game. Yeah, like this has defined these characters, and this always happens with the MCU because it's hyper popular. So like stuff from the movies always makes its way into the comics now. It's like a symbiotic relationship at this point, but yeah, before 2014, who were the Guardians? Who is Groot, Prince Jason's son, Star-Lord? Nobody cared. But now everybody cares because James Gunn, like with a lot of his work, was able to identify like these misfits are the heart of this universe. Like there's so much heart in this movie and the sequel, and we'll get to it. Yeah. But I mean, like, what an introduction. Like from the very first scene on Morag, like any worry anybody might have had is like, oh, never mind. That scene with Star-Lord, that introduction scene is so much fun. And we get like our first actual look at Thanos in this movie. Like he's got an actual scene versus just the post-credit scene from the first Avengers movie. So like that was crazy. And like, again, one of these movies like early on that, maybe suffers from the villain thing a little bit. Like Ronan isn't amazingly utilized in this movie, but the thing that I would always say about the MCU during this era when people would complain about the villains is like, it's because they don't care, and that's fine. Like, because they're so focused on the heroes, and that's the more important thing to get right, in my opinion. And when they get both right, it's fantastic. And we'll talk about that in some movies later on. But yeah, this is such a good movie. It's so much fun. One of Steven Spielberg's favorite movies, Guardians of the Galaxy.
Love to see it.
You can't argue with Spielberg. It's not allowed.
So now we're on Age of Ultron.
Tricky. I
think it's like
this movie gets a little forgettable for me.
Interesting.
I feel like when it came out, I would have put it in B tier, but now I would put it in C. I agree.
I'm cool with having it in C tier. I'm cool with having it in C tier.
Yeah. When it came out, I remember thinking I liked it more than the first Avengers. And I think
it's just because we were excited to see the Avengers again.
Recency bias is absurd with Marvel movies. Like every time I look at my rankings, like after a couple months have gone by with a new release, I'm like, oh god, we got to move that down a little bit. I remember seeing the first Ant-Man and being like, oh my god, is this top tier MCU? And Ant-Man's still great, but Age of Ultron, some of the Joss Whedon cracks start to show a little bit. There's still so much I love in this movie. One of the things about the MCU, and it's like kind of impossible to do because it's film and not comic books, so you have to do more quickly. But I always think of the opening of this movie and feel like, man, I wish we would have gotten another Avengers movie where they just could have been the Avengers before Civil War, because I love them working together. I love that original 6 team kind of figuring it out. But there are some top tier moments in this. I remember Vision lifting Mjolnir was crazy. Like that was wild.
I was gonna say the dinner party scene where Ultron shows up the first time.
Very good.
So good because like again, we want to see that original 6 team more. I couldn't get enough of them, but seeing them together like celebrating and like
in a casual setting, like
like
there's the Mjolnir lifting.
Steve like almost gets it, and Thor's the only one who notices. Like, there's a lot of really great moments. And also, I think something that this movie does, because this was always going to be a tough task, was introducing new Avengers.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
3 new Avengers, and I adore all 3 of them. And still to this day, I'm sad about Quicksilver, but I get it, Fox Studios.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. We'll see if he stays dead. I don't know. I have a feeling.
I will also say, like, this movie, Tony Stark's suit of armor around the world becomes a staple of his character for the MCU going forward, and like really informs his motivations going forward, especially into Civil War. But so yeah, you know what? I almost want to go B, but we'll leave it where it is. We can always move it.
Yeah.
Seeing it in the same tier as Iron Man 2, I think I like it more than that. So I don't know if it makes me want to send Iron Man 2 down.
I definitely like it more than Iron Man 2. Yeah, introducing Wanda for me, Wanda and Vision. Like, obviously, if Pietro stuck around, I think that would be like a big thing for me. But because we only get, the small sample size of him in this movie, it's not as big to me. Although I love the fact that Nathaniel Barton's middle name is Pietro. I really like that moment at the end, that little beat. But yeah, I think it's good.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's probably fine where it is. Maybe we'll move Iron Man 2 down rather than moving that up, but we'll see. Ant-Man.
I was gonna say we got to put something in B, and I think Ant-Man deserves B because for a lot of reasons. I think people hate on it, especially the MCU haters, because it is quite a comedy-filled movie. But I think that it was like when you really look at it, it's a heist movie, and I enjoy that break of formula so much because it's not your typical origin story. Even though he does fight the evil version of himself in the end, I feel like the rest of the beats were different.
Yeah.
And like he wasn't cocky or anything in the beginning. Like he just needed to figure out how to be a better dad and a better person, not cocky. So I really like Ant-Man. I mean, I still wish we got the alternate universe where Edgar Wright did it, because, oh man, I feel like it would probably be a lot higher on these lists.
I was gonna say if Edgar Wright directed this movie, I think it would be S tier. And I think some of the humor has probably remained. I don't know if he gets a screenwriting credit.
He does.
But okay, I was gonna say he at least gets a story credit. But so they definitely used some of his material. I think that you look back on some of these things and think like, wow, that was a better decision than I would have guessed. I think that using Scott Lang Ant-Man instead of Hank Pym and the way they utilize Hank Pym in this movie was a stroke of genius.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know how they thought of it at that time. That was like an Edgar thing or a Kevin thing or what. I certainly don't think it was an Ike Perlmutter thing, but I think that was so brilliant because I think that Hank Pym is, I think the way they would have characterized him is a little close to Tony, because he's got, the arrogance and the ego. And so I think that going with Scott, he's kind of like the Guardians where he's like, the criminal with the heart of gold. It was really brilliant. And yeah, I really like how they utilize Hank, but Paul Rudd as Scott really, really worked.
Yeah,
it really
Paul
works
Rudd
well.
Rocks.
Yeah, it really works well. He really makes the movie. And I think the humor really holds up. I think it's one of these funnier MCU movies, because they're all jokey for the most part. And I know that's a criticism of them, but I think that this is one that really leans into the heavy comedy and it's really good. And the scene with Sam is really good. The
so fun.
The heist on the Avengers compound. I think it's really good.
Yeah, when I rewatched it recently, I just forgot how much fun seeing Falcon pop up was because we didn't expect it.
Right.
And like that's a testament to the MCU overall, just always connecting things in nice ways where it's like you're reminded we're building to something bigger. We're not just having an Ant-Man movie for fun. We're
Right.
having it because he's going to be in the Avengers. So
Right.
like, it's great. And I think Ant-Man just gets a lot of hate just because it's funny, and it's a good movie.
Yep.
I'm noticing now, as we're getting to Civil War, that because we're doing a tier ranking of the entire MCU, just by nature, some movies are gonna get bumped down or put in
Yeah.
places that, like, if they were on their own, at least for me personally, so many of them would be S tier, you know?
Right.
But with that being said, I almost want to put this here and bring this down.
You know,
I'm completely fine with that.
I'm fine with
Yeah.
that because I don't think that's a negative thing for Guardians, because
Right.
looking at the other three movies it's sitting with right now, it's fine. Civil War is a turning point for the MCU because
Yeah.
this movie, like, I mean, it was the first movie I ever saw 4 times in theaters. It remains in my top 3 to 5, depending on my mood and recency bias of my MCU ranking.
Yeah.
Like, it's genuinely one of the best superhero movies, and the amount of storylines they managed to fit into this movie. And people are always like, why didn't they just call it an Avengers movie? Well, because the main through line is resolving the Captain America trilogy, but we also get so many other good storylines built into this, and like 2 of the best introductions to 2 of the best characters in Spider-Man and Black Panther. Like, there's so much great things happening in this movie. I don't think you can cut a scene out of it. Like, it's just so good.
And you know what? They had such a tall order making this. So the fact that it came out as good as it did is like just another testament to, you know, everyone involved. Kevin Feige, the Russo brothers, writers, the actors.
I think that if you looked at like a brain having like an overdose of dopamine, I think that that's what my brain scan looks like when I see the Queen's title card in this movie. I will never forget seeing it opening night. Like, and I constantly in the post end game, pre No Way Home era, you know, it's not that much time, but in between those 2 movies, I was constantly like moving Civil War to the top and like going back and forth, because this is, Gianni, you were saying with the first Avengers, this is for sure the MCU movie I've seen the most. This is, if I had to pick a comfort movie from the MCU, maybe that's changed since No Way Home came out. We'll see, you know, when I have the blue, but Civil War, like, I would constantly put it on, just like whenever. It's like the easiest movie to watch for me, and so much of it is so good. Like, there's never a second where I'm not having the time of my life. Well, there's sad parts, but I just think it's goddamn brilliant. I don't know how they pulled it off, to be honest. And I think that, you know, this is one of those things where you go back again and you're talking about, you know, the MCU villain problem. Like, they solved it and then some in this movie by having, you know, Baron Zemo's there. And I think that he's pretty solid at what he's supposed to do in this movie, but having the main conflict come between Steve and Tony and their respective groups of Avengers and Marvel heroes is so good. Like, it's so brilliant when you don't have a rooting interest and you just love all these people and they're fighting. Like, the airport scene is ridiculous. It is such an achievement. I remember when the world premiere of this movie happened and I was seeing all the bloggers and critics talk about it, and they're just like, wait till you get to the airport scene. Wait till you get to the airport scene. I was like, all right, here we go. And the airport scene happened and I was like, I'm a different person than I was 15 minutes ago. But yeah, this is a constant for me in S tier. This would never be anywhere else.
Yeah.
So.
I to this day, and this movie came out in 2016, I still like just, and it's unconsciously at this point with my Apple Watch trying to
the thing, yeah.
I wish I had it.
It's the coolest thing that's ever happened in the history of cinema. Also, Tony, there's so many line deliveries in this that are like perfect, but I think one that nobody talks about that I absolutely adore is when Nat asks Tony if he brought a suit, and he says, yes, it's a lovely 3-piece Tom Ford. I'm an active duty non-combatant. That is a top tier line. Oh my God. such a good movie. Like I said, constant. It's an S tier all the way. I think it's one of the best things the MCU's done.
And something that's also great about the airport scene, because it's full of some of the best action, but the one-liners that I quote all the time from that airport fight scene, let alone this entire movie. But like, you have the right to remain silent.
Yeah.
Gets me every time. Like Peter's introduction is perfect.
You have
And,
a
like,
metal arm?
Yeah. We're still friends, right? Depends on how hard you hit me.
Yeah.
Like,
or like
so
Wanda, like hitting Scarlet Witch, saying you were pulling your punches.
You're pulling your punches. Yep.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many good moments in this movie, and
T'Challa's "I don't care" his introduction.
Yeah.
Man.
I think we could go on for a long time about how much we love this, but
yeah,
I think we got to keep ranking.
I think
Doctor
this is the
Strange
most
next.
underrated movie in the MCU.
Completely agreed. If this was mine, I'd be putting it in S tier. Like,
Yeah.
no, I'm fine with it going in A tier, but that's as low as I'll go. That's as low as I'll sell. I don't like. I still don't think people realize how good Guardians 2 is.
Yeah.
I would put it in B tier, but I just watched it again the other day. I have no issue with putting it in A because it really is a great movie. Just for me, comparing it to others, I think it would go lower. But like Guardians cast and crew, James Gunn gets superheroes. He's made 3 of the best superhero movies, and I love him.
To be honest, like, I think this is probably a hot take, although, like, to me, it's one of those things, like, I don't know how this is possibly a hot take, but I guess it is. This movie, to me, is better on every single level than the first Guardians movie. I think that it improves on everything. I think the characterizations are better. I think the performances are better. The villain is obviously better. Ego is phenomenal. I think the cinematography is better.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I think this is a perfect movie. Like, it's so good. And the emotional core, like, I think that this is probably the movie that makes me, this is going to sound stupid, but this movie makes me sob. Like, when we get to the third act with Yondu and Rocket, like Rocket during Yondu's funeral, like I could cry now. I am a mess by the time this movie ends. So, like I said, like I'm being very impassioned about this movie because, like Gianni said, I completely agree word for word. This is by far, to me, the most underrated MCU movie, and I will defend it to my dying breath because, again, I don't think people realize how good it is, but that's just me.
Yeah, I echo all of that.
Yeah.
Oh man,
Doctor Strange.
Doctor Strange.
I'd definitely put it in B. I'm pretty happy with putting it with Ant-Man.
I don't know if you guys watched the Cosmonaut Variety Hour. I'm pretty sure it was Marcus who said it though, and I agree. And we'll see how Multiverse of Madness goes, but I really think Doctor Strange is at his best when he's a supporting character in these other films. And that's not a knock like on him. I just think that he carries so much when he's in these team up movies, and even in No Way Home when he's a supporting role. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that what's fascinating about that is, again, like you just said at the time of this recording, we haven't seen Multiverse of Madness, and I expect it to, blow the roof off and be great and be, another one of these really big event movies. But I think that that's happening in that movie. Like, I think that he's being relegated. I think that he'll be the lead and I think he'll have an arc and everything. But I think that he's being relegated to being part of a team. Like, you're going to have America and you're going to have, I don't know if they're doing anything with Clea in this movie. I've heard like weird rumors that like one of Christine Palmer's variants is going to be Clea. I don't know. But I think that he's going to be part of the Sorcerer team and he's going to be dealing with the Illuminati. And I think that a lot of that is because as good as Benedict Cumberbatch is as this character, and we're not even talking about the film Doctor Strange, but I might agree with that sentiment that he's at his best as one of these supporting characters. But as far as this movie, I like the third act resolution. I like how he wins with Dormammu. I really like the astral projection scene where the Ancient One is just sending him through this Willy Wonka nightmare. But overall, again, it's one of these movies, like, it's in the same tier as Ant-Man and it's right around, it's right under the first Iron Man. This is one of those movies that kind of hits those origin beats, right? Arrogant hero, kind of too full of himself, has to be humbled. fights an evil version of himself. I think that that's, the role that Mads Mikkelsen occupies in this movie. So yeah, I think B tier is fine, but I might even move it lower to be honest, but I'm happy with it in B tier.
I think the reason why I love Doctor Strange is that its fight scenes, its cinematography was so different for the MCU up till this point with all the mirror universe fights. But also something to note is Michael Giacchino did this score, and I adore the Doctor Strange.
His theme is top tier.
Like one of my favorite individual character themes in the whole MCU, just like that like harpsichord thing playing in the beginning.
That guitar,
and it's so different from everybody's that like when like you have your scene in Ragnarok and you have him in No Way Home and the role he plays in Infinity War and Endgame, but like once that music comes on, I get excited. Like I get excited to see Benedict Cumberbatch's Doctor Strange. So yeah, and shouts to Scott Derrickson. Like I don't know what happened behind the scenes with that, like where he stepped down and Sam Raimi came in, but I love you, Scott. You did all right. I'm excited for the Black Phone.
I go
A tier.
I'm cool with it.
Yeah.
I think that there's
poster choice.
Yeah. I think there's a world where this and Guardians 2. I think if I was personally making it, they would be the end of the S tier along with some of the other movies that we're about to talk about. But A tier is fine with me. I think Homecoming's phenomenal. I think it's so good.
Just watched it yesterday. Freaking love it.
Yeah.
We're gonna end up with so many movies in A tier.
This is another one that I rewatched a lot.
The rest of
And kind of how you were saying, like Civil War is a comfort movie, like Homecoming is a comfort movie for me. I could just watch it any day. Yeah.
Keaton's Vulture. Talk about bucking the villain problem discussion. Phenomenal. He's fantastic. He's so good. I think the Vulture's a fascinating character the way the MCU handles him. And his performance is so good. And like you're lying if you didn't like gasp a little when he's revealed as Liz's dad. You're lying. It's such a good moment. If you say that you didn't, stop lying. You don't have to lie. It's okay. We all did. It's so cool. Like it's so well handled. And I think that the challenges he faces, like he poses to Peter and kind of like the questioning of Tony Stark as a mentor and Peter's arc in this movie and kind of like finding his own up to this point in MCU Spider-Man and doing it with his own homemade suit and like, saving Adrian Toomes at the end. Like the only thing he's concerned about at the tail end of that third act on that fight in Coney Island is the fact that Toomes' wingsuit's about to explode. Just a fascinating, really, really great Spider-Man movie. And yeah, I think people don't appreciate it enough.
I know that
one of my favorite parts about Homecoming, and I think she doesn't get any credit until No Way Home, is Marissa Tomei, because that scene where Peter gets home and she's like about to rip into him, and he's like, I lost the Stark internship, and she immediately just is like, never mind, I'm not gonna yell at you. What do you need? Like fantastic. The way she conveys that performance, she's one of my favorite side characters in this entire universe as we see her more and more, and especially in No Way Home. But I think her in this movie is really underrated.
Yeah, I agree completely.
I know this might ruffle some feathers, and maybe this is a fight for another day. And maybe you even have this thought in Civil War, but if you don't think by the end of Homecoming that this is the best Peter Parker and Spider-Man in live action, not even for the fact that Tom Holland is giving like the performance of a lifetime at 20 years old, but for the fact that this Peter is written as well as he is, and he's surrounded with such good supporting characters too. Like what a supporting cast in all of Tom Holland's movies, I think that's half the reason they work. Because of the cast and the group, that's the reason why. And people say like the Spider-Man has no stakes. Are you kidding me? Like friends are constantly in danger at the expense of either Spider-Man or the Avengers or you name it. And so
Ned was 5 feet away from the Shocker, who was like knocking down buses. Fantastic. I think it's phenomenal. So yeah,
I love it.
Thor
Thor.
Ragnarok.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
I would put it higher, but I'm okay with it being in B. I'm happy with that.
I don't know if it's a hot take, but like I think Thor Ragnarok is great. It's in the upper half of the MCU. But I think a lot of people say this is like their favorite MCU movie and it's like the best. And I think that looking back, maybe a bit of an overreaction to Ragnarok. I don't know. It's super funny. Tyke is great. Like what he does is really what was needed, I think, for this franchise. Hela's cool. Like Valkyrie's cool. Tessa Thompson's Valkyrie is really cool.
I thought Hulk's role in this movie was good too.
Hulk, this is probably the best Hulk. Nah, the first Avengers, I think, is the best Hulk we've gotten. But this, I think, is number 2. Yeah, the stuff on Sakaar is really cool, like the quote unquote Planet Hulk stuff. But I think there's a lot of this movie that people forget. I think that it can get bogged down a little bit in the middle.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And that's all like making it seem like it's bad. I think it's great. I think it's a fantastic movie.
Yeah.
Super funny. I don't really love Loki for most of it. Just because I feel like we're treading familiar ground.
That's interesting that you say that, because I think it's Thor Ragnarok that really makes his death hit home in Infinity War for me.
Interesting. I would say the end. I would say like the end of
specifically
like the I think the elevator conversation is like the best Thor Loki stuff we've gotten.
Yeah.
You know, I thought the world of you conversation I think is really good.
Yeah.
So yeah, Jeff Goldblum. It's always fun to see Jeff Goldblum. So
True.
I think Ragnarok is like another movie like Guardians where like it just filled out the universe, made it feel more lived in.
Yeah.
And like it's cool. And I mean, this is the first appearance of Thor and Hulk since Age of Ultron. So like we were dearly missing those characters, wondering where they went.
I will say I think that like looking at the tier list we have right now, I would probably move Ant-Man and Doctor Strange into C tier. And then I think that makes it look, because I think that Ragnarok is clearly a tier above them.
I would move Iron Man down to B. I think.
Okay. Yeah. I would be good with that too, honestly.
Just because like looking at like Guardians 2 and Homecoming and like Winter Soldier, like I don't think Iron Man's as good as those.
I personally
hesitate to put Homecoming in S tier because I plan to put No Way Home in S tier.
Yeah. That was the whole like Doctor Strange and Ant-Man moving down. I think is just like looking at everything else we have and knowing like a lot of it is going to go into S, A, or B. I think that those needed to move down. Yeah. So that's just me.
Speaking of which, Black Panther, I think there's a great argument for S, but I'm very comfortable putting it in A as well.
I'm putting it in A personally.
I would go A as well.
I think that in a world where we're doing our full unabridged love of the MCU and we're not limiting S tier, I put it in S.
Oh man, this is gonna be hard.
You know what's interesting? Like, I think this applies to Black Panther. I think it applies to Guardians Volume 2. And I could probably make the argument for Shang-Chi. I think like these feel disconnected from the MCU in a really good way. And Eternals. I would say the same thing for Eternals. Like they just stand on their own in a way that I think some of the other films don't. And like if you told me that this wasn't part of the connected MCU, or if you told me that the MCU didn't exist and like these are the only movies we had,
right,
I would think like, damn, that's amazing, you know? But, yeah. I love Black Panther.
Yeah, I mean Black Panther, man. Like, I remember when it came out, just thinking like how excited I was to see this character get his own movie after such a great introduction in Civil War.
Yeah,
and definitely like this is like the heyday of the MCU.
Killmonger is a top tier MCU villain.
Yeah,
like, absolutely.
Holy cannoli.
I mean, just and like the fight scenes in that movie. Are like so grounded, but like so interesting, and they tell such great stories through the combat too. Yeah. Where like it's not just mindlessly beating each other up. Like from that first fight where he's like letting anybody challenge for the the throne of the Black Panther,
Yeah.
to that end fight. I mean, like everything feels so like the stakes are so real, and that whole like Wakanda feels so cool. It's got to be one of the best settings in the MCU, right up there with like Asgard.
Yeah, it's another one of these like Homecoming where like the supporting cast elevates so much. Like you have Shuri and Nakia and Okoye and M'Baku and Wakabi. Like it goes on and on as far as interesting characters, and then you get to Killmonger and the way Ulysses Claw is utilized, and of course at the center of it all is Chadwick Boseman, who like I think that it's going to be one of those things in years to come where like people get edgy and are like, oh, well, people elevate it because he was taken too early from us. And like he personified T'Challa to me, and he carries this movie so incredibly. Like this is Chadwick in this movie is one of the best performances in the MCU. And yeah, this is another one that was like a moment. Like this was a watershed film. Like people are gonna forget just how huge Black Panther was. Everybody saw it. Yeah. Everybody saw it. So
and also the soundtrack rocks.
Ludwig Göransson, the score too.
Yeah.
I think Black Panther was, and maybe Homecoming was like two of my first big MCU like theatrical experiences where the theater's full and it's elbow to elbow.
Oh yeah,
like that's how it was.
Yeah, I remember Black Panther. The first like few times I went, like you had to get tickets early because like the first couple of weeks this was out, it was like, oh my god, what are you doing if you're not seeing Black Panther?
Yeah, for real.
And like I don't even have memories of people cheering during Civil War so much, but like during Black Panther, like audible, laughing, clapping, cheering, like it was very exciting.
Yeah.
What else we got here?
Is Infinity War next?
Is it?
Infinity War comes out before Ant-Man and the Wasp because
oh, that's right. Yeah.
Ant-Man and the Wasp has the post credits.
Yes, I think Infinity War is next.
Yeah, I think it's Infinity War.
I'm very happy putting it in A. I feel like the internet would put it in S, but I think as a podcast, we collectively all like Endgame more, but not saying like that Infinity War is bad because it's a perfect movie.
I like Endgame more, but I would still put it in S personally. Like I think that this movie is like absurd. Like from minute one with the Thanos introduction, and I've talked about this so many times, but the Thanos introduction in this movie is like on the level. This is going to sound like heresy. Oh my God. Thanos' introduction to this movie is on the level of Darth Vader in A New Hope to me, because the brilliance of having him, because nobody cares about Ultron, right? Like Ultron didn't hit the zeitgeist. I think Ultron's cool. I think this James Spader does a great job. I would die to see him be brought back. I think that would be really cool and they could do something interesting with it. But to the collective pop culture zeitgeist, Loki is the big bad of the MCU. Even though he's like an anti-hero and he's had his moments, whatever. He's like got the third most screen time in the MCU total. He is the big villain of the MCU. He was the one that like is thought of when you think of the Avengers fighting a villain. So to have Thanos in the first like 10 minutes of this movie snap his neck like he's like crushing a bug between his fingers is so brilliant. Like, and I don't even think people understand what it does to them psychologically, but to see Loki snuff that threat out, like to see Thanos snuff that threat out that is Loki, that, brought New York to its knees, that, the Avengers needed everything they had in the tank up to that point to stop him. To see Thanos just like it's nothing, take him out, is like, that sets it up more than any of these post-credit scenes and, his appearance in Guardians, where it's like, oh shit, like this dude means business. So from that moment on, I mean, this movie, like Doctor Strange popping up in the park when Spider-Man joins the action, the Guardians scene, like every single scene is like, oh yes, we're at this part. So, and this was another one of these like event movies where like constantly seeing it in the theater, constantly have packed houses. just having a blast. And so yeah, this is
Until
one of those
that last
theatrical.
scene.
Yeah,
Then
Yeah.
everyone gets dead quiet and hates their
Yep.
life.
yeah. This is another one of those theatrical experiences that I will never ever forget. So I'm putting this in S tier all day.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I know we're trying to do one per. I'm okay with doing more than one for phase 3 because it's bonkers. But Infinity War again just feels like such an important movie for the MCU where there was so much hype leading up to Thanos. There's so much hype leading up to establishing every single one of these characters. And you're
Yeah.
like, how could you possibly pull this off in one movie? And then they needed a second movie, but I feel like they both are so crucial, and I wouldn't really cut anything out of either because they paint this story together of 11 years of filmmaking, of 11 years of different stories and different characters. And in Infinity War, I love how almost immediately everybody gets shaken up and put with people they're not normally with, and like
Yeah.
those new pairings, but like the characters are so strong at this point that like we like them enough to not be worried about new chemistry, and like we're just in it. Like, I mean, nobody thought Nebula and Iron Man hanging out would be fun, but like Infinity War forever will be one of those crazy moments. Like, and I mean, it's wild that the MCU has more than one of these movies, but like, where were you when you first saw it? What was your theater experience like?
I remember like when
And
Flynn and I worked at the movie theater together, and we
Yeah.
just walk in and try and catch the New York scene any
Yep.
chance we could.
Yep. Walk into the IMAX and like,
Yeah.
oh my God, Spider-Man this scene. But the last thing I'll say about Infinity War and the reason to me it hits S tier is it's just like Guardians 2 with the emotional through lines. There's so many scenes for me in this movie that are like that hit me like a ton of bricks. I think Thanos trying to make Peter kill Gamora, I think is incredible. And I think that's one of those scenes that like really, really work because of how much I love Guardians 2 and the way that Peter and Gamora's relationship is handled in that movie. So like when he pulls that trigger and bubbles come out, oh my God. And Zoe and Chris in that scene, ridiculous, through the roof. Awards, please.
Yeah.
Thanos killing Gamora, incredible, show stopping, fantastic, so heartbreaking. And then obviously the end, like Spider-Man, Spider-Man always gets me because of how much I love Spider-Man. And I think that people feel this now post WandaVision, but I always felt it because I have like pre-MCU baggage coming in with Vision and Wanda. But their scene when Wanda has to essentially kill Vision, oh my God, mess. I'm a mess. So I think that this is a very emotional movie for me, and it's one that really hits me. So yeah, S tier.
And the fight in Wakanda, like when everyone like is showing up in waves, like wonderful.
Thor's entrance. I mean, not enough to say about it.
Oh,
I am Steve Rogers. Oh, so good.
I'm Steve Rogers.
I'll get that arm.
I'll get that arm.
I think I could confidently put this in like C or D.
I put this movie on like the exact same level as Ant-Man.
Yeah.
They're pretty indistinguishable for me. I really like Evangeline Lilly's Wasp. So if I'm picking one, I pick Ant-Man and the Wasp just because it gives her a more defined role. And I like Michelle Pfeiffer as Janet Van Dyne too. I think that was a cool introduction. Another one of these that's just like focused on the heroes, the villains, or actually I really do like Ghost in this movie.
The effects are cool with Ghost.
Yeah, and Lawrence Fishburne as Goliath is a cool touch too. But yeah, another one of these like funny, like I think it's mid tier. But I like it a lot.
I think Captain Marvel is another very underrated MCU movie.
Yes.
Agreed. I would put that in B tier.
I think if I was doing like my personal rankings, like I would put it in A tier, but like based off of where we're at, I think B tier is a great place for Captain Marvel. I think it was a really necessary breath in between Infinity War and Endgame. And like, I mean, one of my favorite scenes of Infinity War is Nick Fury, like as he's getting freaking snapped away, pulls out that beacon and like you see that logo and it's like, oh shit. Like And then I love how this is like 90s, and like this is definitely one of the best de-agings in a movie, I think. Like, I think Nick Fury's works pretty well for the most part. But I really like this movie, and I think it was such a great way to get excited for Endgame with like, oh wait, we got another Avenger on the way. Like, just a really cool way to do that. And I love all the ties to the overall universe, but also setting up things for later too. I just think it did a lot for a movie that came out right before Endgame, so it gets swept under a lot.
Yeah. Couple things for me. I think Brie Larson is great. I think that a lot of it feels like a Kelly Sue DeConnick Captain Marvel comic, and that's one of my favorite comic runs like ever. I love Kelly Sue DeConnick's Captain Marvel, and I know that she was like on set, like kind of helping out. So I think that her presence really benefited the film. So I like that, and I was caught off guard by the way they handled the Kree Skrull conflict, and I really liked it. I think Ben Mendelsohn as Talos is. I'm glad that they got like a really great actor to do that part. Because it's hard acting underneath makeup and CG. Like I don't know what the percentage is of how much that's CG and how much that's makeup, honestly. But I think that Ben Mendelsohn, remains expressive. And I think that Carol's relationship with Maria Rambeau is really well handled. I think her relationship with Nick Fury is really cool. So yeah, like you guys are saying, I think it's underrated. I think there was controversy before the movie because girl superhero and it's Brie Larson, and people have like rage for Brie Larson for like no reason. So I think that that impacts like the discourse or whatever, but I think it's really good.
Yeah. Here we go.
I mean, just throw it in there.
S.
Arguably the best of the best.
Yeah.
You know, Flynn, like you were talking about with the ending of Guardians 2, we have no shame on this podcast. During quarantine, when I needed to feel something, I watched Avengers Endgame again.
Yeah.
And I would jump to different parts. I would watch the whole thing. But what really always gets me is that freaking credit sequence where the original six have their signatures get drawn onto the screen. I'm getting Peter tingles thinking about it. Like, this movie is what we were building to. And this movie delivered. This movie had great screen time for all of these characters, super fun interactions, some great like ends for character arcs. And honestly, I don't think anyone could have really predicted what Endgame was going to be before it. No one knew it was going to be a freaking time heist, as Ant-Man says. I love this movie. I think it did an impossible task, and I think it belongs in S tier every single day.
Yeah.
I get chills and a little teary just thinking about it. But when I sat down at the midnight showing to see this for the first time, and Steve Rogers said, "This is the fight of our lives," I felt like this was the fight of my life.
Yeah.
The cringiest thing I've ever said, but it's so true.
Suit up.
It's so true. Oh, man,
yeah, it's crazy to me that like the cultural wisdom now is like Infinity War is thought of as like clearly better than this movie in like typical discussions. And I disagree. I really like how quiet the first act of this movie is. I think that like that was super necessary, and I think that the Russos and Marcus and McFeely kind of knew that like even though we have like Ant-Man and the Wasp and Captain Marvel in between this, it's like, okay, you're going from Infinity War to Endgame, right? Like this is a direct sequel to Infinity War. And after what they just did at the very end of Infinity War, you need a breath. Like you need to take that time and feel that loss and it feels the MCU in the first act of Endgame feels so empty. It feels so empty without all these characters, with how many we lost. And I've always loved that. And I've always thought it was I've always been so happy that they weren't just like, okay, bring it back now. Like they made you wait and they make you take your time. So I love that this movie is like clearly has 3 clearly defined acts. And so the first act of just like feeling the loss, processing the grief. And then the second act is a victory lap for the MCU. Like it's a victory lap. They're going back to different locations and like recreating them for the screen. Like that was awesome. Like seeing 2012 New York on
Mhm.
opening night of Endgame. It was so cool. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. Like, oh my God, amazing. And the way they recontextualize Thor the Dark World and give it some love, like fantastic. Like the time heist is awesome. And then the third act, which is just like comic book splash page after comic book splash page and bringing everybody back. I mean, portals like Silvestri, portals. Like you can just hear the opening notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, like all of this is fantastic. Like the ends of Steve and Tony's arcs, I think, I think that Steve's gets some like has some debate. I like it.
I like it too.
But Tony's is like, just so perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
That
it's
funeral scene is
fantastic.
gut wrenching.
Yeah.
You can
I think
rest now. Oh
Yeah. Oh,
man.
I think it's such an achievement. I really, really is. So God,
I
I
think
love it.
with the exception of Jeremy Renner and maybe Chris Hemsworth, because we haven't seen Thor Love and Thunder, and we'll talk about Hawkeye in a few minutes. But
Mhm.
for that original six, like this is their swan song. I mean,
Yeah.
Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, Scarlett Johansson, like this is their swan song. It's just perfect
Yeah.
movie, arguably
Yeah.
the best of the MCU.
Yeah.
Far from home.
Hey, I go back and forth on this, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I
think
really
it
do.
definitely floats between the two. I think
Yeah.
based off of our list right now, it should be in B, but like
Yeah.
I think it's definitely like again, I want to just clarify. I think it's phenomenal, but
Yeah. I'm fine with B.
I know
Yeah.
Flynn wants to put it higher.
Yeah, I'm like going back and forth because like I've even taken like my own opinion of this movie like down a tiny bit
Yeah.
in the lead up to No Way Home, but I still think it's so good. And I'm just like looking at my MCU like personal ranking here and like it's so hard because there are a couple more coming that I would put in A tier. But I would, if I was making it myself, probably put this in A tier. My A tier would just be littered with with stuff. But Mysterio is perfect. Like Jake
Yeah.
Gyllenhaal's Mysterio is so cool. Gianni, like you were alluding to with Homecoming, like the supporting cast, I love. Peter's classmates. Like I love
Yeah.
his teachers.
Yeah.
The vacation movie thing in this is so much fun. I think we get
Yeah.
a lot of really cool Spidey action in this too. And yeah, so I mean it's all like Spider-Man bias too.
I think the reason I go back and forth on it is because I'm such a sucker for romance. And
Yeah.
I think Tom Holland and Zendaya, their Peter and MJ is like the definitive live action romance. And that's saying a lot coming from me because I love Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone.
Oh yeah.
Say,
Yeah.
you do quite adore those two, but
That's hardcore.
There's something about Far From Home, and maybe it's like because we're still at an age where we can relate to being like this high school age, but like I miss field trips. I miss
Yeah.
all of that. And they capture that energy so well. And that's a testament
Yeah.
to John Watts. That's a testament to the actors. And it's like I don't know. There's something really warm about this, even though it is
Yeah.
arguably darker than Homecoming.
Yeah. I agree with that.
And I guess if I had any hot takes about Far From Home and maybe why I go back and forth on my opinion, it's that I don't know who you would have put in place of him because he gets Peter to where he needs to be, like for situational circumstances. But I don't know if I really liked Nick Fury in this.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And
I really
it's
like seeing him yell at Peter Parker.
yeah, and it's one of those things where it almost feels like I don't know because I don't know what they're gonna do with Secret Invasion and everything.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where I feel like the fact that Nick Fury was a Skrull the whole time might have even been added like in post because it does feel a little bit like, I mean, I guess you can make the argument that it's in character because it's after Endgame. Like we've had this crazy like universe shattering event that like Nick Fury is completely out of patience and he's just like whatever. But yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I don't know. I do love this movie though. I think it's fantastic.
I think something that I really, really, really love about the Spider-Man Home trilogy is that John Watts wanted it to be like teenager 80s coming of age films. and each one kind of has their own distinct flavor and comparisons. And like you said, Gianni, this one really focuses on the romance aspect of Peter's life, and as much as Homecoming does as well, but like that was more just like, you know, like teen like flings as opposed to like an actual like relationship. Because him and MJ, I mean, like there's so many great scenes in this, and I think that I love the comparisons to the 80s movies, because like Tom Holland said he wanted to be this generation's Marty McFly, and I think he is, but he's also just happens to be a superhero instead of a hoverboard.
You just made me think of one thing that I want to defend real quick, because people get on this movie's case for the bus scene when Peter almost like has them blown up with a drone. If you don't think that is something that a kid would do today, given access to like the Stark drones, and he's got someone in the back, he's just trying to get a photo deleted off their phone. I don't know. That would happen.
I am also, I don't even really like that scene that much, but I'm a defender of that scene just because of how much people hate it.
Right.
Not only do I think that I completely agree with you that it's something somebody would do, I think that it is so in line with Peter Parker to be the biggest idiot in the world and
but
just
also
like get
being such
that
a
picture taken.
genius.
Like that's what, like, Peter is brilliant and he's the stupidest person imaginable. That's how I think of Peter Parker. So like that to me felt like so in character. Like Peter gets access to drones, of course he would blow up his bus. Like that's so Peter Parker to me. So I don't know. I am also a defender of that scene. Again, even though I don't really even like it.
I'm
like,
the same way. Like
people like, oh my God, that's like their evidence that Far From Home is terrible. And it's like, really? This? Okay. Weird hill to die on.
I think we're on to our first TV show now, boys.
Oh, we're going in that order? Oh yeah, release order. Okay.
Yeah, so WandaVision.
Oops. Yeah.
WandaVision is solidly A tier for me.
Yeah.
I'm with it. I think it could be in B, but at the same time, it did so much important things for the standards of MCU television that like coming out the gates, we had something completely unique, and it just felt like nothing we had gotten before. Yeah. And it was two characters who were begging for more screen time with how much chemistry they had and how interesting they were. And like how you said, Flynn, a lot of people went back to Infinity War and really loved that scene even more and like loved those characters more. WandaVision was such a fun ride too. Every week on Twitter, just discussing what the hell happened and what could happen next. Like it was just such a fun time.
Yeah, I like I said earlier, I have my personal MCU ranking like open to make sure that like my opinions stay consistent because it's so hard when you're talking about the MCU. And just like as a guide, WandaVision is my number 8 out of everything. I think it's brilliant. I think that everything with Wanda and Vision, I think that Wanda leading her own show and being like darker as a character, like she's, you know, somewhat of an anti-hero at times in this, I think is perfect for the Scarlet Witch as a character. And week after week, like every episode, it was like, oh my God, this is everything I wanted it to be. And then people were like, oh, but the finale kind of sucked. You kind of suck. That finale is great. Okay. I get it. I get the whole like, oh, it's just another CGI battle. What do you expect? I mean, the episode before that, like Agatha has her kids on magic leashes. Like, yeah, of course we're gonna have a fight. It's a fucking comic book. Like, no shit. Like, it's what I expected. What I didn't expect was watching it in the morning and running out of tears watching Wanda say goodbye to Vision and her kids. I mean, that's what I think of when I think of this finale. I think of Wanda's goodbye to Billy and Tommy. And like, I don't know, maybe it's because Elizabeth Olsen is one of the better actresses in the MCU, and maybe it's just because they got the characterization so right. But I think WandaVision is just masterful in everything it does. I get the Ralph Boner thing, but I don't care personally. So
yeah, I like WandaVision a lot. I think for me, honestly, and this might go against my MCU ranking on Letterboxd, so no one look, but it flirts with S tier, like for all of the reasons that you just listed, Flynn.
Yeah.
I think if I'm not mistaken, right now I have Loki as my favorite MCU show.
Interesting.
And I think I still agree with that. But like I said, I think WandaVision does flirt with S tier.
Very
just because
interesting.
of that family dynamic that they set up, and
Yeah.
they like not only do they break your heart with these characters in Infinity War, but they had the audacity to do it again and
Yeah.
like
Watch
10
Vision
times
die again.
at
Yeah.
the end of this show.
Yeah. Billy and Tommy are so great. Vision's so great. Jimmy Woo and Darcy, the way that they're kind of
Yeah.
utilized is really
Yep.
cool. The introduction of Monica Rambeau is brilliant. Yeah, I don't know. I think that like now it's underrated at this
Yeah.
point already. So
And just the mystery of Westview as it was unfolding was really interesting to me.
yeah,
I thought like
yeah.
very intriguing. I was
And
I was
hey, we
really
three New
hooked.
Jersey boys. Let's
Yeah.
Yeah.
go.
Oh yeah,
It was still Mephisto.
yeah. All along. It was Magneto.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
Agatha.
So
Agatha.
Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Yeah, that come out before Black Widow. I'm having
Yeah,
trouble
Black Widow was
remembering.
May, and
Yeah.
Falcon Winter Soldier was February and March.
See, this
Wow.
was
Believe
a
it or
weird
not.
time for the MCU because this is when like cancellations and delays were happening. So it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels like all of these came out within a week of each other.
like
Falcon and the Winter Soldier
Ugh.
is I just hyped up WandaVision so much. Falcon and Winter Soldier is my number 7 on my MCU ranking.
Hmm.
I would
When I'm
put it in
okay with
A tier.
co-opting an override and putting it in A.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm cool with. That's why I was like looking at it when I said there are going to be so many things in A tier,
Hmm.
because that's what I would put Falcon and Winter Soldier. I like this really grounded, very political. I think that it's the boldest the MCU has gotten with its politics.
Hmm.
I think that obviously, like, people don't cut the MCU any slack because Ike Perlmutter was overseeing a lot pre like 2015-ish. So he had a lot of final say in what they did get to do and how far they got to go. But I think that, Falcon and Winter Soldier has a bit of teeth. I do. And Sam's arc and earning the shield is
Hmm.
something that's so emotional to me. And one of these things that I'll never forget. I'm always talking about the theater experience, but Falcon Winter Soldier was at home, like on the couch, but waking up and watching that finale and seeing Sam in that suit for the first time. Oh my God. I can't even there are no words. When he breaks through that window, that's Captain America. And
Yeah.
he earned that. And I love that so much because he didn't have to, right? Like Steve picking him was enough. But the fact that they did go that route and they did, kind of make him earn it and show, I think it was so brilliant because I think a lot of people were still like, oh, well, maybe they should have given Bucky the shield. And it was like a bit of a debate. And I think that the MCU decided we'll show you why it should go to Sam.
Yeah.
Because he is the closest to Steve in terms of being a good man. And his ending speech at the end to all the empty suit politicians, I play that all the time. Like I've gone back and watched this finale a bunch already just because I love the feelings of that. And I love what they do with Bucky, and the way they use Zemo is pretty interesting. And I love US Agent, like the way they did US Agent in that show and made him like a false Captain America to show what makes Steve so special, what makes Sam so special. Yeah, it's so good to me. So this is actually my favorite MCU show so far, Falcon Winter Soldier.
It's actually
That and WandaVision's like 1A, 1B.
Yeah.
It's the closest they get to a TVMA, I think, too.
Yeah.
Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Like there's some really heavy stuff.
Away
in
from
there.
Moon Knight, I think that'll take
Yeah.
that crown. But I would
Sharon throws like acid in some guy's face.
Yeah.
I would retweet everything Flynn just said. I think there's so many reasons why I love this. The Captain America trilogy is my favorite trilogy in the MCU. And Falcon and the Winter Soldier is like two of the best characters that didn't have their own movie. And like getting more of them, getting 6 episodes of what felt like living in the Captain America trilogy for like 6 more hours.
Yeah.
Like US Agent, Carly, such great characters.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, again, Flynn just said it, but I need to say it again. That end speech is one of the best moments of the entire MCU. And
Agreed.
There was a lot of discourse with people who said this show was too political, who said this show was woke. And it's like, okay, get over yourself. Sam is Captain America, and this show showed you why he is. Like, people were legitimately rooting for US Agent. And I'm like, guys, we need to understand what you're saying here. Like, John Walker wasn't inherently a bad man at the start, but by the end, he had done some really unspeakable bad things. And Sam Wilson is everything Captain America should be because he is Captain America. And there's a reason why Steve picked him to get the shield at the end of Endgame. And like you said, Flynn, I'm kind of glad that this show was about Sam's personal journey of accepting that Steve picked him, because that's a huge freaking deal. Captain America was the first superhero in the States. He was an icon. I mean, at this point, it's 2020. So for almost like 90 years ish. And for him to take over that mantle is such a huge deal. And he earned every bit of it. And that costume is so gorgeous. It's easily one of the best things the MCU has done.
Yeah.
That's a great suit.
So now it's Black Widow.
Black Widow.
I'm okay with like Z or D.
Yeah. I'd probably go. Let me look. I'd probably go C.
I go C.
Honestly, I think it's a bit underrated. As I say, it's in C.
I think, unfortunately, the thing that really hurts it for me is that when it came out, if this came out right after Civil War, I think I would have liked it a lot more. But like the fact that she's already dead and we have to go back and now learn about her, I appreciated the fact that we did. And all the side characters are really great, especially Yelena.
Yeah.
But I think this movie suffers where the entire time you know her fate.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, man, if this came out right after Civil War, I think we would have had so much more Natasha love. And I think her death in Endgame would have meant even more. Because like we knew her past, her family.
Yeah.
And like Jeremy Renner wouldn't have been the only one who knew it besides her.
Right.
Like, I think that, again, if this comes out when it chronologically happens, I would put it in A or B. But just because of how it happened. And this movie also got delayed a million times. So I feel like there was way too much time to think about what it could be. And again, not saying it's a bad movie. I think it's a good movie. I enjoyed watching it. Yeah. And I think Yelena is one of my favorite MCU characters, but it just suffers from those things, in my opinion.
I agree.
Yeah. To me, like it's got a little bit of Mission Impossible in it at times, which is fun. And I think that the thing that really elevates it is Nat's relationship with Yelena. The other side characters like Red Guardian's really fun. Like the supporting cast is cool too, but like that central relationship with her and Yelena, I think is really strong. Yeah. So, but yeah, I'm cool with like, I think C tier is where it belongs probably.
Yeah.
Now it's Loki.
I personally would put Loki in B. And I really
that's
like
painful. That hurts.
I love Loki. I
really like it.
And I think Loki was one of those shows where like we knew it was going to be that little end game bit where Loki grabs the Tesseract and disappears. But I just we didn't really know what it was going to be, and like it was long overdue to get just a straight up Tom Hiddleston focus project. But what unfolded, so much fun, so unique. And I don't feel as bad seeing it in like the same category with like Ragnarok and Captain Marvel and Far From Home. So, but again, when I'm looking at the other TV shows, I think it's not quite as good, but I still love it. I mean, the last episode is one of the best finales we've gotten.
Yeah.
I love Loki. I think it was really beautiful, like one of the best looking of the MCU so far. Just the cinematography was really good. And I think it was kind of a bold choice to give us a series about a character that, again, Flynn, you said he has like the third most screen time in the MCU. Like, not that there weren't going to be droves of fans that would love to see more of Loki, but like, I think it was kind of a risk to bring him back for an entire series.
Yeah.
But I also think it's like no surprise that it's getting a season 2.
Right.
And you know what? As we're getting to the end here, I'll just want to say again, like in A and B, and specifically B here, like if you asked me on any given day, should I watch Spider-Man Far From Home? I'd be like, yes, that's top tier MCU. It's just the nature of doing a list like this. Some of them are going to fall.
Yeah, I very much to close my thoughts out on Loki, I echo those sentiments, Gianni. I was not super excited for this. I thought it was a bad idea. Because we had, I don't know, 3 Loki resurrections at that point. I think. So it just felt like this kind of thing where like Loki, and like I said, with the impact of his death in Infinity War, I really didn't want to undo that. I thought that was like an end point for him. And it kind of felt like with what we saw of Loki thus far, it always felt like the end he was building to. And so I felt that was really honest and truthful for that character, the way the MCU presented him. So Loki was the first MCU show that came out, one of the rare MCU projects that had to kind of convince me, right? And I think it does right away. And obviously Tom Hiddleston is great, and like he's going to be one of these performances for these characters. It's like it's going to be inseparable. But man, I love Sylvie. Oh, I love Sylvie. From the time that Sophie gets introduced, like I was hooked. I was in love with that character, and she gets a bad rap now because she killed Kang. Whatever, like yeah, big deal. She broke open the multiverse.
Whatever. If anything, we have her to thank for No Way Home. So thank you.
Those last couple episodes were like they really brought it home. Interacting with all the other Lokis, like Richard Grant's classic Loki is so good.
Glorious Purpose.
Yeah, that illusion scene. So this was one where like the ending like really like made the whole thing that much stronger for me. So
also
I would definitely put it in B.
Totally forgot to mention this, but the Loki theme song rips. Like such a good theme. Man, I still hear it.
So synthy.
Also, we didn't say it once, but Owen Wilson, baby. Gotta love it.
Yeah. And the fact that Natalie Holt wrote it before knowing anything about the show is just like mind-boggling to me. Like, I think she's lying.
Yeah.
I think What If is next.
What If?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Confidently put in C.
Yeah, C.
Just because it's like such a mixed bag, you know?
Yeah, like there's episodes where I would slap them into A, and then there's episodes where I'm like, I don't think I'd ever watch that again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not in a bad way. Like I'm not mad I watched it, but
I feel like we'll get answers for this in I feel like they did it this way because of Multiverse of Madness. But I remember being really turned off by the last couple episodes of this. It was like the exact opposite of Loki, where I was like, do we really have to connect this all? So, and again, it's one of those things where like I'm gonna have to eat my words because Multiverse of Madness might come out and Captain Carter might be a part of the Illuminati, and it's like, oh, I'm an idiot. But like to me, I don't know. If you have the entire Marvel multiverse and like that's the team you come up with as the Guardians of the Multiverse, that makes zero sense to me. What? Yeah. These are the guys? This is the best you could do? They should have gotten washed in that finale. So that was always something to me where it just felt like an unnecessary stretch. Like, why are we like, do we really have to connect this? Do we really have to have, I don't even know what they call them, Ultimate Ultron? I don't know, Vision Ultron.
Well, I would say one thing I did like about it was the Ultimate Ultron. I thought it was kind of cool that he was the villain. Didn't love the selections of the heroes because I think Evil Strange would never belong on that team.
That's interesting because he's like the only one where I'm like, yeah, this is probably a guy you put in there.
Yeah, but he's evil.
I'm just talking like power level.
Power level, yes. But like also Party Boy Thor made no sense being there. He's not as good as regular Thor. Let's get regular Thor. Yeah, and I mean I don't want to give that What If a bad rap, but like I think it was just fine. And
I think it's fine.
I think it was fun. I mean, Star-Lord T'Challa episode was best episode.
Yeah, that was really good stuff.
So if you asked us in September, I think we'd slap this in S tier. It's not an insult, but I think it belongs in A.
I think I go A as well.
Yeah,
I would say.
Although this was ranked like number 3 for me in the MCU, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I remember after it first came out, like thinking that it was really, really great. And I still think it's really great. If I was making it personally, it would probably end up in B, but I'm cool with it in A. Tony Long.
Yeah. I mean, that fight scene. Oh, beautiful.
Simu Liu, like I remember I think the most prominent thought in my head after this came out was a lot of people just found their new favorite Avenger. because Simu Liu's Shang-Chi is so much fun and so cool, and like
Yeah.
he's got his own like he's very much like carved out his own like characterization. Like he's not really like anybody else in the MCU.
Yeah, one of the more relatable
Yeah.
protagonists, you know.
So I think that it's really, really good. I think that visually it's really interesting, and a lot of the action is really well choreographed, and Tony Long.
Yeah.
Love the 88 Rising soundtrack.
What Wen Wu is a great villain. So
And I think something great about Shang-Chi is that a lot like Guardians, unless you're a pretty big comic fan, you might not have known him before. And the MCU really did a great job introducing him, taking liberties where they felt necessary, changing up the 10 rings to make it better for modern times.
yeah.
But also just like he's such a fun character where like I get like a Spider-Man-esque spirit from him where like he's still pretty young and like lively guy, but like he's also just a relatable dude. I mean, like the scenes where they're parking cars and that's the job they have because they don't know what they want to do with their lives. And like especially in the 2020s when this world that we live in is as uncertain as it is, you know, like I feel like Shang-Chi was just a really great movie for when it came out, and all three of us really latched onto it. Just like it was nice to get an origin story that wasn't your typical Marvel beats. Like you could say he fought an evil version of himself at the end, but I feel like it was
no, it's totally elevated. Like Wen Wu is so like
that's what I mean. Is like it's probably one of the best cases of it, and that it made sense the story wise. So Shang-Chi rocks.
And I the other thing that I was thinking after Shang-Chi came out is they better find a way to take those rings, because he is clocking fools if they let Shang-Chi keep the rings. Like they need to take them, because the stuff that Wen Wu does, I mean, Wen Wu rules Earth for like centuries, and Shang-Chi is the best fighter in the Marvel universe. Like they need to take those rings, because this dude's gonna be doing work if they let him keep those things. I love how he's just like doing his own thing until he gets those rings, and Wong is like, hold on, wait, come here real quick. You need to come to the sanctum. You can't have this. So yeah, Shang-Chi, great stuff.
One of my favorite post-credit scenes too, with them singing Hotel California karaoke. So fun.
It's a shame because Wong's gonna die after that.
I hate how much you two are speaking that into existence. I'm not acknowledging it.
His eulogy's already written.
He's done.
Sorry, buddy.
That's Doctor Strange's arc right there.
Eternals.
I think it's B.
I would probably put it in B too.
Yeah.
I think this is definitely one of the most divisive Marvel movies.
The most polarizing Marvel movie, I think.
I think this is like B and a half.
I like that.
If there was, and this was one of those ones where like I watched it and I really, really loved it. And then upon a couple more rewatches, I'm like, this is really good, but I don't love it as much. I think that expectations got tempered from the initial reaction. And so that kind of facilitated a situation where I thought I liked it a little bit more than I did, but I still think it's great. I love Chloe Zhao. I hope that, you know, what really makes me nervous about the reception to Eternals is that like it would turn the MCU off from getting filmmakers like Chloe Zhao in the mix, because I really want like more auteurs to take stabs at this, like you know, get versions of Edgar Wright's Ant-Man, right? So, you know, but that being said, like I think it is really, really good. I think there's some really great characters in this, and I think that it's one of these
Makari gang, baby.
Yeah, I think it's one of these things where like we were talking about earlier with the Doctor Strange solo movie, where like his character is elevated in like other projects. I think that we're going to see the Eternals kind of split up and pop up here and there. Like we might see Cersei somewhere, and like you know, Druig and Makari doing their own thing, and I don't know what's going to happen with Eros in that post-credit scene, but I think that these are the types of characters that could really benefit like spreading out. And I think that this would have been more well received as a Disney Plus series. If Chloe Zhao would have been allowed to just like develop. I think that the big flaw in the movie is these characters have been around literally forever in terms of like Earth. So the fact that they have to keep going back and forth through the timeline. I think that if we got a series where like the first few episodes were like the Eternals in different eras and showing like why that era was a defining flashpoint moment for them, and then we kind of got the last couple episodes where it's set in the modern day, I think that it would have been stronger overall.
That's a really great point, because I remember when we came out of it together, I think Flynn, it was you who said that like the Hiroshima moment didn't really work for you. And I think like that could have been more impactful again as sort of like an episodic thing. Like
yeah, for sure. Like you know, like Fastos is in that moment like blaming himself. Like if we had seen him make something other than like the steam engine, like if he was like really upping there, and like Druig talks about it too with like the weaponry. It's one of those things where it's telling, not showing. So if we had a full thing of like, you know, Fastos, you know, getting a little too big for his britches and like helping with this, you know, weaponry, and then that happened, I think that it would have been impacted more. So
yeah, I think I like the idea of it as a TV show more, where it's almost like how we had that bit of where is everyone at this point. Like episode 1 is who are the Eternals, and then like episodes 2 through 4 were like this Eternals here now, like kind of gathering. And then I think it could have developed that way, but also at the same time I like the MCU taking risks like this.
What we got is great.
Like I think for some people didn't work out, and that's fine, you're entitled to your opinion, but I think that the Eternals was definitely like a breath of fresh air if for anybody that says the MCU is a formula, because this is nothing like what we got. And I think just the big ensemble cast, like some people said it hurt it, I liked it, but again, I think this movie will definitely just be an interesting one to see how the reaction grows to it as the years pass, and like how much we revisit it, and like how they become important, and like if some of them join the Avengers, if some of them become villains, who knows? Because I mean, now they don't have an agenda, they kind of get to pick what they're going to do. So I'm glad it happened, and I really like a lot of the casting choices. I think it's exciting to see these people join the MCU in this way. And I mean, Harry Styles, baby, I'm all in.
He's a really good choice for
Bring
Eris.
him in, I love him. Oh, Hawkeye.
I love Hawkeye.
Yeah,
Hawkeye might be my favorite Marvel show. Like
I would probably put it in B.
Yeah, I begrudgingly agree. Just because like looking at the list, I get it. Because like personally, Kate Bishop might be my favorite MCU character.
I love Kate.
Newer MCU characters. And I think when we get a true Kate Bishop story, where no offense to you, Jeremy Renner, but like it's just Kate, I might be slapping that in S tier real fast. But Hawkeye was such a great show for when it came out, of like Christmas theme. We're so excited about No Way Home that we can't even think about anything else, but we had this to enjoy leading up to. I mean, I think the last episode was the week No Way Home came out. So like great timing by you guys. Kevin, good job. But I loved Hawkeye. I think it was such a great way to introduce a new iteration of a character without brutally murdering the one we know and love. And I was kind of nervous that our Hawkeye Jeremy was going to bite it, and he didn't. And I think the story was really good. I just really liked it. And I mean, Wilson Fisk showing up was freaking sweet. And, like, Echo's origin story. Deserves an Oscar for its standalone like short film.
That was amazing.
So many great things happening in this show. And I mean, I think I would put it in A, or I would even think about S if I was doing one TV show for S, either that or Falcon and Winter Soldier. But I mean, I love Kate Bishop and Haley Steinfeld. Oh, and Yelena. I even forgot. The freaking Matt scene.
Their scene together, is so good. That's probably my favorite scene in the show.
Just an honest, earnest conversation between two badasses
meeting Yelena. I think that I think the show is great because, like, you know, it's about time that we got something adapted from the Fraction comics, right? And like, it's probably not as good as the comic run, but it's still like a really smart way to utilize that character. And it's one of those things where like people are like, after Endgame, how do you do street level? And it's like this, like it's still perfect. It still works. So I think that Jeremy is at his best as Clint in the show for sure. like by a wide margin. And Haley Steinfeld just is Kate. I remember saying I can't remember if I texted it to you guys too, but like I remember definitely saying to my mom after I watched the pilot that I thought in 10 years' time, Haley Steinfeld's Kate Bishop could be talked about on the level as like Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark and Chris Evans's Steve Rogers. Because that, like, to me, for that character, that's how pitch perfect that was. Like, that adaptation of that character was. I think she's just so perfect and so much fun. And yeah, it's a really good time. I love Hawkeye.
Yeah. I will say that I think this has become like an unconscious, maybe a subtle rule anytime Clint Barton appears in the MCU. And that is that we have to make it so that he feels like he's just going to die or like he can't get out of these situations that he's in. And I
Yeah.
think you don't feel that more than you do in Hawkeye. And I'm like, this is
Yeah.
the worst week of this guy's life. And there's
Yeah.
no way he gets home to his family this time. Like, I didn't
Yeah.
think he was going to make it.
He's just a grumbling dad.
Yeah.
So,
Shouts to
yeah.
Lucky the Pizza Dog too. We
Yeah.
love
Yeah. And Rogers the musical.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, man.
So a worse
Here it
fate than
is.
F, right?
Yeah. A worse fate than F. This is, I mean, what is there to say?
I
Like,
think
we could do a whole
Go ahead.
podcast on this, honestly, but
we have
something I would,
yeah.
and we'll do more.
something I think I want to say that I don't remember if we mentioned in our review, and it's that is like Tom Holland has had the hardest time, I think, as Peter Parker. From maybe
Yeah.
it's from the loud fan base on Twitter, and
Mhm.
maybe it's hopefully only them, because it seems like he's loved at all the press events, but like
Yeah.
it's so much shit, like so much.
Yeah.
And he arguably puts in the most work. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, now that all this BTS footage is coming out, you see him in a mocap suit doing everything.
It's such a funny juxtaposition for me because as we're doing this now, you know, the digital's out and like a lot of the behind the scenes stuff is coming out. And it's so funny thinking about these shouting matches on Twitter, like, well, Toby's the best, and well, no, Andrew's actually the best. He just had the worst movies, and well, actually, Tom's the best. And you just see them together, and they're having a blast. Like they love each other. They love like working with each other, and they all have nothing but kind things to say. And they're just like they all have different takes on Peter, but they all feel essential. And man, like this, you know, as a Spider-Man fan, this movie was everything and remains everything to me. Like I think that I left my body when Andrew came through the portal. I think that my soul escaped my body.
It's those damn portals, man. They're gonna get us every time.
Because that's the only way to like rationalize the sound that I made. Like it was something inhuman. But man, I just like everything about this, like the way like John Watts and company have an impossible task with this movie to bring back all of these characters from different movie universes and have them fit into what we know of the MCU, which is, I mean, look at this goddamn tier list. It's so much. There's been so much up to this point. So to make them feel consistent in here, but also make them feel consistent with what's come before, even though the Raimi verse is so much different from the web verse, is so much different from the MCU Spider-Man. And it all works. Like all of it works. And like, I'll never understand how they were able to pull it off. But the three Spider-Men together, just like I said, it's everything to me. I mean, you know, that's maybe No Way Home is the death of cinema to some people, and like that's fine. But to me, like, you know, people always say like, oh, I felt like a little kid and whatever. I did. Like, I felt pure joy, and I really, really needed it. I really needed this movie, and I'm so happy that it exists the way it does.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it 8 times, and my 8th viewing was last weekend because I just wanted to feel something again. And this movie really did have such an impossible task. But every time I've watched it, I mean, Gianni and I looked at each other when we were first watching it, every scene thinking, is this real? Like, are we alive? Is this actually happening? And Flynn had already seen it and was immediately seeing it a second time, just looking at our reactions. Like, waiting. And like, again, looking at S tier, all 5 of those movies were events to go watch, but No Way Home was the best one.
Yeah.
And like just the pure joy and reactions and just happiness to see the 3 of them together, and like to see more of Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin or Alfred Molina as Doc Ock, like all of them. It was so good to see them all back. And like you said, Flynn, like there's vicious Twitter fights about which one's the best, who's the best Peter, who's the best Spider-Man, who's the best both. I don't care. They're all wonderful. We get all of these movies. We get to watch all these movies. And then we get the icing on the cake where the 3 of them meet, they team up, they have a heartfelt moment. And, you know, this is what we do, man. Like it was so good. And the fact that they pulled it off in this way, like I don't care about like the people who don't like superhero movies and say it's not cinema. Like to you it's not, but to a lot of people this is one of the best movies they've ever seen. It was one of the most fun movies they've ever seen in theaters. And I mean, it's still making money, and it's been in theaters since December 17th, and we're recording on March 19th. So it says quite a lot about how it's doing in theaters during a pandemic. So I just think that this movie is so beautiful, and I can't wait to get all 3 of us got the Steelbook. So April 12th, we're excited.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I'll say for this, because we already talked for like an hour about No Way Home when it was like first came out, and we did our spoiler review. But I think that both Toby and Andrew's film series ended quite unceremoniously. And I think that, again, adding to that impossible task, the fact that the team behind this movie was able to give a sense of closure for both of those Peters. And like now, you know, like the conversation is like, well, like let's have Raimi do Spider-Man 4, and let's have Webb come back for Amazing Spider-Man 3, or have, you know, Andrew be part of the Sony universe of Spider-Man characters, I think it's called now. And it's like, whatever, if we get that, it's cool. Like I'd love to see them in these roles again. But if we don't, it really feels like they were able to cap those franchises in a way that the franchises themselves weren't able to do. Man, seeing them again was so nice. Like it felt like genuine friends, like greeting you. Like, oh my God.
I mean, the first thing Andrew says, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. He's calming us down because he knows we're freaking out. They built in a moment for us to scream.
And it's one of these ridiculous things where like, oh, it was the worst kept secret ever. Like everybody knew Andrew and Toby were in the movie, and it's like
still surprises.
Didn't matter. Yeah, it didn't matter because I didn't know for sure. You know, like they didn't put it
And
in
we
the
didn't- and we
trailer.
didn't know
They didn't
how.
officially say it.
We didn't know if it was a cameo. We didn't know if it was for one fight. You just didn't know. And like that mystery leading up to it, and the fact that it's after one of the most heart-wrenching MCU scenes ever, we needed that.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so good. But again, if you want to hear our full thoughts on that, we've already spoken about this movie for a long time.
Yeah, at length.
I think it's fitting that this is the movie we ended on with our tier ranking here. But I think it's going through something right now that a lot of MCU movies do, and more specifically Tom Holland's movies. And that is that it's just being dragged through the mud, and people are saying like it wasn't actually that good, and here's why. And there's a lot of think pieces out there, and a lot of tweets, and a lot of even video essays are going to be coming out now that the HD version is out. And you know what?
Yeah,
they're just not right. They're just cynical, mean, cold people. This movie is great.
It's fiction.
Amazing.
It's not correct.
Yeah.
It's a cinematic achievement, and it should have been nominated for Best Picture.
Should have been nominated for Best Picture. We got anger. We got a hate comment about that. And I don't care. It should have been.
So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like that to close that, you know, 15 years from now, nobody's gonna give 2 shits about Belfast. No offense to Kenneth Branagh, but Spider-Man's gonna remain. So whatever. I mean, you lost. So yeah, anyway. I best movie. 10 out of 10.
I think this is a pretty great tier list, boys. I don't even think we need to adjust it that much.
This is like art. We should frame it.
Yeah, I feel good about this.
We definitely need to save that, because we know if we forget, it would be good to know.
Yeah. Yeah, in
Chatty
10
Cinema Brain
years,
Trust.
in 10 years from now, when the Eternals Renaissance goes on, they're like, how did you not have that in S tier?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Be
Or
like,
the What If Renaissance.
yeah, sorry.
Those-
When Ed Norton comes back in Incredible Hulk for Hulk No Way Home, and people are
Multiverse
like,
Madness.
how did you not even appreciate Edward Norton's Hulk? It's the same character as Mark Ruffalo's Hulk. You just got recast. You can't bring Ed Norton back. I'm sorry. I guess like a variant. I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah.
Spider-Man S tier. That's the end of that. Honestly, can we put Guardians 2 in S tier?
Let's do it.
Okay.
committed.
I'm happy with that.
Yeah. I mean, I would leave it an A, but I got outvoted. I can't be mad.
I'm very satisfied with that. Like,
Actually, you know what? I'll make a trade. If you put that in there, can we put Hawkeye in A?
Sure.
I'm
That
cool
makes
with
me happy.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I
All
love
right.
Kate Bishop, man.
Yeah, this is good.
That is our MCU tier ranking. Be on the lookout for more of these in the future. This was very fun. And,
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll catch you in the next one.
Peace.
Where the hell is the stop recording?